Good, okay. Good evening, members. Call to order the Revere School Committee meeting of the whole. On January 21st, 2025, we'll all rise and salute the flag. Pledge allegiance
To the flag
of
the
United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, and justice for all.
For all. Okay. Take a roll call, please. Mr. Caggiano.
Here.
Miss Milbury Ellis.
Present.
Mr. Kingston.
Here.
Miss Monterosa.
Here.
Mr. Sinella.
Present.
And Miss Rizzo.
Present.
And Patrick Keefe is present. Okay. Approval of the minutes.
Any questions?
We have a. Oh, there's no seconds in this, that's right. All right, so. All in favor of the minutes?
We'll approve them in the next meeting.
Yep.
So we-
Attached warrants? I know, huh?
Yeah, no, we understand.
Still getting there.
Mr. Chair, Mayor, I have a question on those.
Okay,
Matt, I was just wondering on item 38, what exactly was the 80,000 for the cultural exchange program?
That was, so we have the 5 educators who came from other countries on H-1B visas, and that was the cost of contracting with the organization that we used to bring them over.
Oh. That was all.
and, Matt, I had a question, not so much a question, I'm just curious. Are all the schools working from the same, copier contract?
Yes, so when I started, it was dozens
Right,
and it was chaos. And so we did a lot of work to meet with potential vendors and secure a relationship with a vendor who's on the operational services division state contract bid list. So we can contract them at a good price with all the perks that come along with bid list vendors. And there's a single point of contact. So it simplifies the leasing process, the payment process, the maintenance contracts. We're just dealing with one person district wide.
so just anecdotally, the city was using, each department had whoever they wanted, as long as they're on the state bid list.
Okay,
We brought everyone under one contract, one style, well, I wouldn't say one style, but one brand. And we're already seeing things like, the price is obviously beneficial, but also if you're using one type of ink and toner and they're using a different type, you over order. I'm glad to see it. The city wasn't doing that. We have fixed it since, but
sometimes diversity is helpful to school and sometimes standardization is helpful. So in that world, it was clear what the best practice would be.
also if one printer's down, you can run to another department, and use the other, it's very helpful. I was surprised to see it, but we got it taken care of. Great. That's all the questions I had. Any other questions from the boards?
I just have one quick, can you just follow up on the 80,000, that program? I know you said it was to bring them over, I just don't remember hearing anything about it, so I'm interested in quick.
Yeah, so Dr. Garcia would have shared that. It's through a grant that we have for the Educator Diversification Grant.
Mhm.
And so we have a partner organization, trying to remember their name, RVP Consultants. And so they actually take care of all of the paperwork and everything else to bring folks over. We identify, these are the teaching positions that we haven't been able to fill. In this particular case, it was a middle school math position, a high school biology position. I'm gonna forget what the other ones are. Do you remember offhand?
That's what I was interested in, like,
Yeah.
they're teaching, and then how long do they stay for, or how long is the?
3 years is the agreement.
Oh, okay.
And that 80,000 covers for the 3 years.
Oh, okay.
So it's 5 people for 3 years. And after that, they can apply for an extension if we like them and it's working out well.
Is it working out?
It is, yeah. We've had one that we've struggled with a little bit, but really that was a function of she has 2 small children of her own. And being in a new country and trying to navigate all of that has been a challenge for her, but the other 4 have been phenomenal.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just
Yeah.
want to know a little bit more
Yeah.
about that.
And
Any other questions?
I have just one
Mr. Caggiano?
clarification on 190. Rebus Associate in Public, Professional Development. Can you elaborate on that or
If I see the number, I'll know.
190?
One, two things that it is.
Six,
Course material for you.
Okay, so that is for, all teachers, when they're newly hired into the district, are required to complete a new educator course. And so currently we use Rebus and Associates as the contractor to provide that course. It basically gives all of the teachers a common language around expectations for what we want to see in the classroom. And so that is the course materials for the teachers who are taking the spring cohort of that class,
Thank you.
which I think starts tomorrow or tonight. Next week? Oh, last week. Okay, close.
You busy?
Any questions regarding? Okay, Lawrence, no, great. All right, financial reports. Ms. Monterosa.
Yes, Matt, I'm sure you're gonna walk us through the red, but I just wanted to ask more why the series 9,000 was in red. And my next question is there a chance we're going to be in a deficit in any other areas once all the raises from the union negotiations begin?
Yep.
So how are we doing?
Okay. Can I answer those successively?
Yeah.
So the first question was the big ticket item that we hinted at last month. To say we're meeting with special education and just trying to get a grip on the state of those accounts. This is not unusual if you take a 10-year view. There's some years that sped sales and has a huge surplus like last year. There's some years that by October of various factors have driven the costs up across the board. So the primary drivers here are increasing costs for the special education tuition placements, increase in volume of students who have been outplaced compared to what we would expect in both residential and private schools. So both of those are driving the cost of the tuitions up from what it's been the last 2 years in a dramatic way. And then the other cost increase that hasn't been normal, but we're facing this year is an inability to place special education teachers through the normal hiring processes and the normal staffing processes. And so having to use outside agencies to find qualified people to take those positions, and those come at a premium. So those are cost drivers. In addition to a correction that we did with the budget, as you remember, to say, we don't want to sit on $1.5 million of unspent money and spend. So as Murphy's Law would have it, the year that we adjusted that, we need it. So that's what this last page is showing you in actual numbers. Our initial thought, as you know, we're paying attention to this, is each year we receive 4 quarterly payments from the circuit breaker program. Our normal practice, which is common across the Commonwealth, is that you can bank those 4 quarter payments and hold on to them the year that they come, and then credit or expend them in the subsequent year. So we were counting on the 4 quarters from last year to help us this year, and it is. But you can actualize a current year's quarterly payment or 2 or 3, or if it got wild, all 4 if you would like. So what we'll do is we will actualize the first quarter payment from FY25, which already has been received. And that is more than what the current projected deficit is in the special education accounts. So that's the simplest way for us to solve in the immediate for that. Now that will open a new problem when we get to our conversation about next year's budget. If we normally depend on 4 quarters, and there'll only be 3 quarters available for the budget, then you'll see a higher need for tuition costs in next year's budget. So that decision for this year will affect the next year. But don't forget that if we want, we can count on next year's 3 quarters and the first quarter from FY26. That's why circuit breaker exists, to ride out these storms as you go.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yep.
And the other thing that we will realize at the end of this year, because especially with the school psychologist positions that we've been trying for years to fill, we have budgeted for them, so we're gonna see a surplus in, the instructional services 2000 series. That at the end of this year, Desi will be saying, hey, how come you didn't spend all this money you said you were gonna spend? And we're gonna say, well, we're gonna carry that forward, and that will offset for the special education too, because one of the things that we're doing, as Matt alluded to, is hiring agencies to give us the services that we hope to do internally. And so we are billing our 9,000 series with expenses that we put into the 2000 series. You see what I'm saying?
So, Dr. Kelly, do you see those offsetting at some point? I mean, as you mentioned, bringing more of it in-house, which is great, and I know it's been a challenge to find
Yeah.
qualified people. But as you bring more in-house and have the people on staff, the out service, or the outside services that are doing some of the work, that would go away eventually.
Correct, yeah, yep. It's significantly more expensive to hire an agency to do, like the school psychologist work or the occupational therapy, and we continue to fill any positions that are, or try to fill any positions that are open.
I have kind of a silly question, but I'm just curious, I imagine there's thousands of students who are in this category of students, getting these services. Are we making sure that, all of the students that are getting these services are using them or taking advantage of them, or, you know, just that there's no, maybe, or that they're still here, or like, are
Oh,
there
yeah.
ways to like check? cross-check those
Absolutely, yeah,
things?
yeah, we keep very careful track of all of the services. It's written into their IEP. If any of them are getting these services, it's written into their IEP that they need to get them, and the special ed coordinator at each building makes sure that every special needs student in that building is getting the services that they're supposed to have. Once we do an outplacement, like if a student is in a hospital school or something like that, the burden comes on that other school to provide the required services, but they're still required to do exactly what's written into the IEP. So if it says that they need OT 3 times a week and speech therapy twice a week and school psychologist once a week, that school has to provide it.
I guess my question is more so of us making sure that there's not money that's being paid for these services and they're not being used. So like
Mm.
if students are moving and maybe not reporting it, or we're late in getting it reported. I just don't know how the inner workings works. That's why I'm asking, like, is it possible that we could, you know, save some money? somewhere?
We eyeball that like you wouldn't
Okay.
believe, because that's
That's
where,
the answer then.
that's where there's a lot of money.
When the
Yeah,
student
exactly.
moves, they may not tell us, but their files are requested by their
new school.
school, and that's when their IEP gets pulled, and then we get notified.
Yeah,
Okay.
and depending on exactly what the scenario is, like, especially for the kids who are exceptionally expensive to educate, like I was talking about kids who are in a hospital,
Residential.
school, or residential or
Mhm.
something like that. The state law requires that we split that cost until the receiving district can fully assume the student, because they wouldn't have budgeted for that. And sometimes you're talking about a $500,000 annual educational expenditure. And so in a case like that, we would continue to assume half of that cost until next year, until the next budget season, and
until
then
their
that
next
school would have to
budget.
take over
Okay.
it. Yeah,
At
That's
least until
by
the next
law.
budget.
that's by law, yeah, and so we still end up having to spend some of that money, but it's significantly less than what we would have budgeted for
Promise,
typically.
everything's okay, kid. Are you delivering pizza to me?
I can walk quickly through the reds. So
All
we
right.
saw the reds in the special education, and we did the appendix to be really clear about that. The transportation accounts have some reds. We have no choice but to encumber funds to get the kids to school. Don't forget that these numbers are assuming every kid attends school every day for the rest of the year. So as we get into the fourth quarter, we're able to say which of these purchase orders actually aren't being used now because the child has moved or changed schools. So the transportation will always have some red numbers at this point in the year. There's no reds in substitutes, but there are some cool schools that are very close to the red. Don't forget that we budget a lot of money in the district account to help with unexpected spikes and leaves of absences in individual school accounts. So you'll always see individual accounts go red, but the district-wide account is black, and Peter is paying Paul there to make that happen. And then the tradesman overtime account has already peaked into a deficit. part of that is due to the fact that rather than contracting to install technology screens district-wide, which would have been a substantial cost, we're having the maintenance team do it in overtime. So we're saving a bunch of money by utilizing their services after the school day compared to what it would have been to contract out. But it's sending that account into a deficit because we had not budgeted the difference in that account. So Carl's up, Carl's doing analysis of all the tradesmen overtime, but the primary driver was that.
There was something else. It was the smart TVs and the furniture order. Remember last
Mhm.
year we let every school order furniture? So the custodians and maintenance guys had to put together all of those tables, chairs, everything. And the quote that we had district-wide was around $80,000, and we figured out the overtime cost would be about 16,000, and so that's what we went with, but we didn't know that until like August. So we had already done the budget. So that line is a little bit upside down. With the maintenance one is a little upside down. The custodian one, we still have money to spend. Most likely that will go during the winter with snow removal, like we had to have them all come in yesterday to clean up the schools so that we could be in today after the storm. But we've talked to Kyle about that, and he's gonna be a little bit more stringent with any other overtime than that, and we're monitoring that as well.
And just my general question is, and how we're moving forward, should we be worrying about a deficit at the end of the school year in general, or?
No. So that's a separate question. This is a report of what has happened so far, and have we actualized any problems? Can we see them? The second very important question is, what about moving forward to the year close and also generating carry forward as we get into the budget process? So your business finance department will all go on strike if you ever settle 4 contracts within 7 months again.
That wasn't our fault.
Not your fault.
I know, very
So
true.
we are at the
I know, we were
very,
trying to do it within 3 months.
we are at the very end of actualizing the collective bargaining changes. So just this past Friday, we actualized the bump for the 805 members of RTA. And in 4 or 5 weeks, we will actualize their retroactive pay. So this was the first week that I was able to do an analysis with everyone just about at their new collectively bargained rate. What does that look like? My estimate is that the retro will be somewhere between $800,000 and $900,000 when that hits. So I've got that in mind. So no, we're not headed to a current year deficit. There's so many variables now, but if you ask me, are we gonna get into that $4 to $5 million of unspent money to deal with that chunk of teachers? I would say nothing will be like the last 2 years when the ESSER funds were helping us, but we should be all right there. The major question for us is not, are we okay this year? It is what happens this Thursday when we see the governor's budget, and with all the work that we've done to prepare for whatever may come, what do we actually have to do? So we've sketched, a budget calendar, and we have to see those numbers. Then we have to do our work at the city side to say how much of that increase is finding its way into your appropriation. And then we sit down and say, so how does it look? And all the many strategic things that we have going, how will we move those into our budget? So we'll have a bunch of work to do in March, April on that. But it's kind of like, this is, for a CFO, the Monday before the Thursday, it's super stressful.
Mhm.
Because if they say X, then we go, all right. And if they say Y,
It throws
we
everything
go,
out. Right.
and if they say Z, we go, we weren't expecting Z. So, but
Right.
there's no anxiety to be worth it until we see the number
Yeah.
and roll with it. Don't forget, we have been in communication for years strategically for this coming budget when we knew that the ESSER funds would dry out.
Mhm.
So we've done everything we can, and we have to first see the governor's number, then negotiate with the city with those realities, and then say, okay, now we can come together and build it going forward.
My last question or point is, I know the governor has stated that if there are cuts to federal grants, the state will work and do its best to cover for districts, but I'm assuming once we hear any news about federal changes, we'll have that conversation and how it affects us.
Right, so I've been hustling at all the preliminary work that the business finance office can do, getting everything ready. So when the door opens of the governor's budget and the cherry sheet, and then the door opens of the Schedule 19 negotiation, we're ready to work. Part of that includes a very thorough staffing model to say who is where and what are their funding sources as of right now. And if they all were a part of the district-wide team going forward, who are we planning on being where? That includes all of our special funds.
Mhm.
So if, for example, we know going into the process, Title I has, say, 24 full-time professional staff members. If the Title I grant was severely reduced, we'll know, here's what it can hold. Here are the people who have been in that group, in that fund that need to find somewhere else. So our work right now is just to be ready to have the conversation. The only reason we don't talk about all of this aggressively is because we just be kind of,
It's a waste of time.
Hypothetical,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just wait.
so
And I think the fact that with the new administration, because one of the worries was that the Federal Department of Education would just be abolished. But I think the fact that there's been a named director of that department and a named assistant director
Mhm.
gives me a little bit of hope that it's not gonna be abolished. So that's a good thing. What exactly it means, we won't know for some time. But the other thing that I'll add is I think that we've been really good fiscal agents. All of us, the school committee, Matt, especially and his team. By having that $10 million backup, it will help us address if there's some huge dramatic change at the federal level, or if we run into a little bit of a bump, like I know Matt said, we did mean for when we hit the ESSER cliff. In my mind, I'm hoping it lasts till we hit the SOA cliff, which is 2 years from now.
that's right.
If we couldn't touch it till then, that would be phenomenal, but if we have to, we're there. We would want to make some decisions as a group together. Like, we don't want to just extend the problem out 4 years. We would have to start thinking about how are we gonna start
Sustain, yeah.
reducing so that we can sustain in a new financial reality.
Just one more point of information. We've given everything to the purchasing agent at the city to go out to bid for regular transportation services, special education inside transportation services, and district-wide cleaning services. And the Commonwealth just Friday released the template for the food services that they're being more draconian in their management of it. So this winter, in addition to all the budget stuff that we'll be doing, I'll be overseeing going out to bid for 4 major contracts. My reason for doing them, giving everything in by January 2nd, was it would be great to have those numbers in hand as we begin to
begin
deliberate
budget.
budgeting, instead of saying, because we don't know what the spikes will and won't be in those.
Mm.
So we've done everything we can to have very fruitful budget conversations in early March and through April as a committee and a team.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding financials? Okay. Food service, there are none, communications, none, personnel items.
Thanks, Matt.
We have new hires,
Thank you, Matt. All right.
new hires,
Matt.
retirements, resignations, and terminations. Any questions regarding? No? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
take this.
Acceptance of gifts and donations.
I just wanted to speak to this one briefly. Principal Coyle had applied for and received, thankfully, $175,000 playful learning, grant to bring in the Playful Learning Institute. And before he applied, his teachers and the governing board agreed that this is a path that they wanted to go down. They're looking at this in an exploratory way as something that we might want to adopt in other schools down the road. So they're gonna kind of pilot and see how it goes, but, and you can Google the organization, but basically what they look at is how to engage kids in playfulness throughout the day, particularly for our youngest students, pre-K through 3. And there were some requirements to receive the grant. One of them was that it had to be a full inclusion school, which the Paul Revere is. So that's why they were able to be the pilot for us, on that. I'll just read a quick blurb on what the Playful Learning Institute says. Participants gain tools and strategies to intentionally design and embed playful learning instructional strategies across the course of the school day. Playful learning supports deep dives into content, creates equitable access to learning for all children, and creates varied opportunities for authentic assessment, particularly during instructional blocks across the content areas. So it doesn't mean they're gonna be out on the playground all day. It means that the teachers are gonna work together and have some training on how to create playful moments as they're teaching math or reading or the alphabet, you know, whatever the case may be. So, that's that.
Great, 175,000 towards instruction,
Yeah.
wonderful,
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Coyle and the team.
yeah.
yeah.
School field trips. We have a number of them.
Yeah.
I know the ROTC is gonna be doing the civilian program again. Was this the one they did last year? No, this is a different one.
This is the brand new, this is the one that they're doing at the Paul Revere School, right?
No,
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 it's a
that's
Marksman,
different.
this is a
No.
field trip.
This is a
Oh,
field
these are
trip.
field trips,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, okay.
I do want to just give a shout out to the JROTC who came in first in their marksmanship competition last weekend.
Oh,
And we have an enormous trophy that I'll make sure that I show it to you guys before you leave. It's pretty impressive. It has all of the districts who've won every year back to 1998 has a little plaque on it. And in the last 5 years, this will be Revere's third.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so
I got the kills, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
I'll bring it, maybe I'll bring it into the next meeting and put it up on the
Mm-hmm.
board.
Something else option on the field trip?
Wonderful to see field trips.
Yes.
Okay, appointment of 2 members for non-union salary working group.
So this is the working group that I had emailed over or at the start of the holiday vacation about that we would like to get scheduled and going. And so we're looking for 2 members who can sit on that. And I think the suggestion I had was that it includes somebody from Ways and Means and somebody from personnel. Together with them will be myself, at least one of the assistant superintendents, a couple of folks from the RAA, and a couple of principals. And what we're hoping to do is give more of a long-term, this is how we give raises, establish that. So that the committee, after negotiations with unions, isn't debating about how to follow up. And the other thing we had talked about was the RAA salaries bumping up against principals.
Mhm.
And then we get into a jam where nobody wants to be a principal because why do I want to take that on when for 5,000 less I can be an AP,
Right,
Correct.
you know, so.
not work summers.
It's not
Right,
that,
not work
right.
summers and just have all of that conversation. And the RAA, when we negotiated with them, was open to having the conversation. And that's why I thought it would be good to just kind of start this committee and do this all at once. I don't think it's a huge time commitment. I'm thinking that maybe we'll have like 3 or 4 90-minute meetings. And hopefully we would do that in the next month or 2 so that whatever the committee decides, whatever changes are gonna be made, this school committee can approve them and we can move forward with making sure the folks who haven't had raises yet would get them.
Or who fall in that category,
Yes,
right,
yeah,
where they're bumping up,
right,
okay.
yeah.
I would like to volunteer. I'm on the personnel committee and I'm also on the chair of Ways and Means.
Anyone else? We can put 2 people.
And I will just say, no pressure. The RAA mentioned Aisha for this because because of the negotiations. I'm just saying, they're like.
I second that.
They couldn't even meet it.
I second that.
RAA.
I get it, I get
I
it.
second that.
That's hilarious.
We don't have to have 2, but if
That is
anyone else wants to be on
I
it.
know.
No, if you want me to do it, I will,
Okay,
it's fine.
well, so everyone's, we'll book you both in and then you can't make one, at least you have someone else
Somebody
there
there,
to
that's
give
fine.
updates. I was just gonna say that whoever's on it to give updates to the full committee as you all meet, so we just know how it's going.
Sounds good.
The next item, that was kind of under this, because it might fall under the working group, was substitute raises by Mr. Kingston, so.
I just feel all staff, well, almost all staff, I know there's some we're still gonna talk about, but the rest of the staff members have received, whatever we wanna call them, wage increases or whatever word we wanna use, the substitutes have not. And I just don't think that's fair, or equitable. So that's why I wanna bring it up.
I think that,
If it wants to, if it needs to be included in that other working group, that's fine, but, they didn't get anything. So.
Just correct me, did we review the substitutes and go out and see how much this other substitutes were making in
I asked
in
for
neighboring
that, but I
districts?
don't think it.
No, just last year, I thought, and
Mhm.
didn't we bump them up
We
last
did,
year?
yeah.
Bumped him up last year.
Yeah.
Significantly.
And
I
they
thought.
we gave them a decent bump last year because we were having trouble finding substitutes to come in. But we had, bumped them up a few years before that. They don't typically follow with union negotiations or anything like that, but I do think, John, it would be, I think having that committee, that's a good place for it to be.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
and I was just
So
gonna
everyone got
say,
an increase in, except for one subsect of,
Yeah.
Staff.
If I may, what are the rates? For the other, we don't have.
104 with the high school diploma, 117 with a bachelor's degree, and 134 with a teaching certificate per day.
that
could
was
you
my
say that one more
question.
time? I'm sorry.
104.
104 with a high school diploma,
Mhm,
117 with a bachelor's degree,
mhm.
and 130 with a teaching certificate
So
per
what are
day.
we calling it, like a 6 hour day? Just
Yeah,
about?
yeah, they don't do the before and after school stuff.
So 6 into 104 doesn't work too well. I mean, it does, but
Okay, that was my question, if it was
it's like
scaffolded.
$17 an hour. For the people on the 104. And maybe it's more 6.5, I would say, I think that's fair, so it's even a little less, so
There's
that's,
very few people that don't have at least a bachelor's degree that want to work in schools, to be honest with you.
but still the 117 divided by the 6 isn't much higher.
A lot of the high school diplomas are parents that want to just be able to
Work the
maybe
school
work
day.
twice a week. And that's why they do it.
All right.
I know at the high school, the teachers do the cover a period and get paid, and that's fine, but that doesn't work in elementary, so.
It does, we have elementary teachers who cover on their prep period.
So we'll refer a discussion to the working group. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah.
And then also the paras have that stipend.
Right.
Next is the subcommittee names and structures. Well, Ms. Renzo brought some recommendations.
I just put it out there. It's up to this committee. I just say, let them choose what they want to do. Just my suggestions.
Do you wanna walk us through the suggestions or why you picked certain options over others or?
No, I think it states exactly just the addition of a couple of committees that might. I think I put the reasoning behind it.
So, if I may, Mayor, I was looking at some and there's some, I have different thoughts on them all, so I don't know if folks wanna go through them and. We agree on some changes, we're good, if not, we could put it as a motion, for the next meeting or something like that.
Okay.
So, the first was finance versus ways and means. Personally, I'd like to keep ways and means, that's just what the committee is called at every level of government, so I would prefer to keep that. Is there consensus or thoughts?
I agree, with-
I
agree
just
with
found the
that.
consistency with the city side, so that was
Yeah.
good by me.
The next suggestion by Ms. Bronson Rizzo was changing our planned maintenance to buildings and grounds. I think that makes sense. I know when I came on, I was like, what do we mean by plants? I guess it's just like our gardening work, so I would be okay with changing the buildings and ground. Folks good with that?
fine.
I'm fine.
And then governance versus policies and procedures, I think governance is good just because it increases what falls under policy and procedure anyways, and every committee, every government structure should have a governance subcommittee at some point.
And for me, I thought we should keep the policy and procedure. I think it's,
I
for
thought
the sake of
people to
transparency, it's people to understand
yeah.
what it is that that subcommittee does. I just don't, it's not that it's a complicated word. I just think it's more easily ascertainable as to what exactly the subcommittee does with policies and
Also, too, in the
procedures.
public and everything, I'd rather have names that the public looks at it, they know exactly what the committee is about, and policy and procedure would make more sense than.
Yeah, I only feel that way about policy and procedure, and the next one, safety and security.
Okay, that's fine. So we'll keep it as is. And then the next one was changing safety and security to school climate. I agreed to keeping it to what it is. School climate falls under building principals jurisdiction. That's not really what we oversee.
I like climate, but I'll heed.
I like safety and security, I do.
The consensus to keep.
Safety and security.
The next suggestion was changing our DEI committee to adding the B for belonging.
Fine with me.
That's fine.
Mayor?
No, I just, whatever acronym we'll have in a few more years.
Yeah,
hopefully, but then-
exactly.
Yeah.
It's gonna keep changing, I know.
That's fine. Okay.
We won't have it at all.
Well.
Well,
I
hopefully,
don't think that-
hopefully at some point we don't need it.
Mhm.
Hopefully the work's done and we've set off generations of.
I think I've been waiting 65 years for that to
Yeah, I don't
happen.
think that's happening, sorry. Nice thought.
All right.
So, and Ms. Rantham Rizzo had actually brought up, under this a point about a recent legislation that passed, so it's actually called the Educator Diversity Act, and I actually led the state coalition that helped pass it, so what I'm gonna do is send you all a fact sheet of the provisions, because this law, actually, a lot of the provisions fall onto districts and committees, not just DESI, so it's a conversation that we will have to have, throughout the school year, but lucky for us, we have someone on the front lines of it at the state level, so
Okay.
I'll send you all the short version of the law so that we can continue to have that conversation.
Thank you.
And the last change beyond the suggestions was changing health and sped to student supports. I think that makes sense because health and sped sounds like we're just limiting it to those two, but
Well, what other things would fall within that subcommittee? Aside from issues concerning health and special education?
Could we put transportation in there? Because right
Nutrition.
now, as we stand
That
now,
would be health though, right?
as,
Nutrition?
as we stand now, transportation's with plant and equipment, plant maintenance, or buildings and grounds, whatever you wanna call it, it doesn't belong there.
I think after you had said it, I put it down as a separate.
No, I agree, but maybe that could go in student support. Or maybe it should be his own committee, but there's really not a lot, I mean, basically, we're required to do what we're required to do, I don't know what that committee would do,
What committee?
transportation committee.
That's my fear too.
I mean, we have to do what we have to do, I don't think there's much debate on.
yeah, if there's anything we could all, I think if we can all just agree to leave it in building and grounds, just because there's very little and we're a small committee to add yet another committee.
To have to schedule 3
Yes.
4
Yeah, no,
6
that's fine, it's just, it seemed like an odd place, I don't know if it belongs somewhere else, maybe it belongs in
Yeah,
student support.
I tend to agree. We start wading into too much. It's.
Yeah, we had a meeting on it because we were talking about the bus situation.
And transportation is it's a Pandora's box, but it's also the budget breaker and for the entire Commonwealth. And because it's unfortunately,
Matter of fact.
it's not. I mean, it's not a right. It's, you know,
It is right.
I don't know. I tend to disagree. I agree that we should have safe paths for kids, but I also think that, you know, it becomes a bit much. I think kids should be walking to school. I think that parents should encourage them. But that's, again, that's just my feelings and I get it.
Especially older
We
kids.
provide it, you know.
Rich, we'll take it off your plate too.
So for the few times this comes up, folks are okay in leaving it under buildings and grounds.
Yeah,
Yep.
So then going back to student supports versus health and special ed,
Student support's fine, I mean,
I like keeping the health and special ed.
we can put it as a vote if there's differences. I don't mind either way. Okay, so we'll bring that as a individual motion at the 6 p.m.
And I think with special ed, it's become a word of being demeaning.
Yeah, I thought
And I
we were
know we're
supposed to say
trying to get
children's
away
special
with, people just use the word sped. And not so much a special education, but support.
Okay, so that will be a vote. And then we address transportation. The next two were suggestions to add committees. One was this for the superintendent evaluation that has, my understanding is it's always fallen under personnel. It did this last time, so I don't think we should create a different one because then I don't know what personnel would be meeting for without this. So I would suggest we not create a new one. The consensus?
Yeah, what other personnel issues would we be addressing?
Yeah, most don't
As a
fall under our
subcommittee of
jurisdiction.
personnel.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And then curriculum and achievement, I also don't, my personal advice would be to not create this because then we're stepping into things that don't belong to us. And if there was something like the honors program or graduation requirements, we could always create a temporary ad hoc committee without actually having to have a standing one that stretches our capacity even more.
Agreed.
Well, and some of the curriculum, falls under policy as well.
I was gonna say policy or.
Such as
Right.
graduation.
Okay, so then
What will it be?
I will make the changes we did agree on to our structures. Folks also, I believe I heard almost from everyone. There's one member I haven't, so I'll reach out to him for structures and I'll have the new committee assignments for everyone by our next meeting. And then we'll just vote on the special ed versus student support at our 6 p.m.
Great.
Thank you, Ms. Ronquillo.
You want me to ask Fred if he wants to add anything?
Oh, yeah.
Fred, I think you're on mute, but if you want to unmute, did you want to add anything did you hear from that discussion?
No, it's the realignment of the committees. I think titling is immaterial as long as they serve the purpose. Some points were well made, whether it's, the wordage is derogatory, as, some people could misconstrue. But, everyone seems to have a reasoning and/or. I don't have a problem. Transportation, as Mr. Kingston made reference to, it's kind of an orphan. We had a meeting on it regarding, we ended up talking about passes, but it was moot. So whether, I agree that it should not be a committee unto itself because that just spreads everything out a lot thinner. So to leave it where it is now, I don't have a problem with it.
And then, I'll reach out to you separately, Mr. Sinella, to see what committees you want to be on, because I've heard from everyone else, but I want to take you into account as well.
All right, thank you for your time.
Sounds good. I believe that is. Well, regular meeting agenda is. Oh,
I do have one. I know it's not on the agenda, but, when we talked about the grant that the Paul Revere got it, when we talked about early childhood, I was wondering if the mayor wouldn't mind giving us an update on the McKinney.
sure. So we have secure, so what John's mentioning is, Mr. Kingston's mentioning is the McKinley School, the refurbishment and repurpose of the McKinley School. So we have we've procured an OPM project manager, owner's project manager, and an architectural firm. Maybe about a year ago, we had some schematic designs regarding what it could look like if we use it for multiple purposes, using some of the remaining ESSER funds that the school had, applying for a state 911 grant, which would be moving the Revere Winthrop 911 call center from the Revere Police Station over to a wing of the McKinley School. And then again, using some additional grant funds that we received over the course of the last few years regarding a food hub. So the three uses would be basement level would be food hub. People ask why we would use the basement level. If you've ever been on top of a kitchen, when it leaks, not fun. So having all the heavy work with water and cooking and all that stuff wouldn't be leaking on any classroom space. Classrooms would be the left wing, or mostly the old school. If you know, the McKinley School had an addition put on it in 1927. So the left side of the school going all the way up well, 2 floors would be, early child education space. I think the capacity was in the range of 300 students or so. And then the right side wing, about 14,000 square feet would be the 911 regional call center as well as training center. So that is going through a deeper dive on design, and it's out for design right now. We're gonna get a little bit of a synopsis on the cost, what that's gonna mean to the city and the municipalities. And more than likely, we'll be able to come to some sort of an understanding and plot forward. That would also, there will be a cost to the city, of course, when we're talking about the scheme of things. It shouldn't be too much, and especially as you take that out over a certain period of time, it'll really bring the entire school, the playgrounds, the park space, all back into a really, state-of-the-art space for City of Revere, for its students, for its families, but also the food hub and the 911 call center. We're running out of space at the police station. As you can imagine, it was built now almost 20 years ago, 15
Wow, it was
15
not old.
15 years ago, 15
Wow.
years ago. And it's of course, as you know, it was built for much less offices. You can't find parking over there. There's not a lot of space.
Parking's awful. Yeah.
So it's a bigger department. They're busting out of seams at the call center right now between Revere and Winthrop. It's become one of the larger municipal call centers in the region.
Is the 911 call center, are they still interested in having that location for the Finley School?
Yes,
Okay.
that would be the right side. So, and the good news of all that is, because of the state grants and the 911 grants that are involved, it would pay for a large portion of the renovations. You do have to do things like seismic, renovations to the building because it's an emergency call center, it needs to be hurricane, tornado proof. So there'll have to be a little more structural backing into the building. Of course, you get elevators.
Benefit from that.
Of course you will. You'll have elevators on both sides because you can't have to make it ADA compliant. The old school, of course, is not. So the big ticket items are things like that. And of course, just got renovation and you name it. But the architects really love the building. It's obviously, as we all know, it was at one point a really beautiful school. There'll still remain some of the kind of characteristics, the large hallways, the large stairwells will still be in place for the most part.
And
Adding
the
access,
exterior is gonna be largely intact.
correct.
So,
Windows
yeah,
and facade will be pointed and all that, but all in, probably about a $30 million renovation. But the amount of state and ESSER funding that will come into play will be well north of 20 million. So when you think about all of that, for many years, bonding out, the 10 million, let's just say we had to bond $10 million over the course of time. It's really, it's relatively inexpensive.
I just think it'd be such a game changer for people who have more early
Huge,
child
huge,
education.
huge.
Yeah.
So hard to find daycare and stuff, I think would be.
Agreed. And that'll serve, as Dr. Kelly mentioned, the, ages 3 to 5 population.
That's why I thought of it when I saw the college video. So I apologize. for putting
If
it off.
all goes as planned, we'll have something probably in front of the council. Possibly before the budget this year, and if all goes as planned, and of course you'll present to the school committee as well. If all goes as planned and we start actually moving, you probably see something in the tune of 2027. Opening.
That's awesome. Thank you. Sir. Sorry to put you on the
Oh,
spot.
that was great. The trickling it out there.
Yes.
So the last item here, which is to let you all know that I put in the motions wrong for the 6 PM. So if you all agree in the approval of the consent calendar, we don't motion to vote because we are voting. So I'll just switch the technicality of those two.
Oh, just to vote, you mean?
Yeah, to vote. Yeah.
Okay.
what is it? Sorry.
For the motions, it's, I meant to put motion to switch the location of school committee meetings to city council chambers, and then motion to accept the school improvement plans, because we are already
I
voting.
see, okay.
Motion to adjourn,
Second.
all in favor?